Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for The Leftovers Season 2. This video is for my overall review of Season 2 of The Leftovers as a whole. If you'd like to see my reviews of the episodes of Season 2 of The Leftovers, you can check out the videos I did for those. I'll put a link in the description below for them. So first off, I gotta give a spoiler warning for all of Season 2. If you haven't seen Season 2 of The Leftovers, you will not want to watch this video, otherwise things will be spoiled for you. So, those of you who have seen my quick review of Season 1 of The Leftovers will know I was very weary of the concept of moving the entire show to a different location. Often when shows do something like that, have a sudden shift at the start of the season, it tends to not go very well, so I was very uneasy about the whole idea. I knew that they were going to leave some characters behind, like the mayor of Mapleton, Kevin's dog shooting friend, and Jill's best friend Amy, all of whom I thought brought something to the series, and then suddenly I was being asked to accept something completely different. Plus, I'll be honest, I wasn't a huge fan of the idea of a town where no departures happen. To me, that kind of seemed to go against the whole premise of the show, which was about people dealing with the consequences of the effect of the departure, so to go to a place that wasn't affected by the departure seemed kind of to be missing the point. So, as much as I really wanted to see another season of The Leftovers, I was very weary that this next season would completely jump the shark and ruin the show that I loved, and boy, I could not have possibly been more wrong, and I've never been more happy to be proven wrong. Season 2 was amazing, a giant improvement upon Season 1. Season 2 took the show to new heights I didn't possibly think it could go, and it made it easily my second favorite show currently on television. I would go as far to say this show is vastly underrated, and everything about it is completely top notch. I have to admit though, I'm not a fan of the new theme song. It is kind of a cheeseball song, and when it first came on, I thought that my fears had been confirmed that this season would be shit, but it was just the opening was a bit off. The rest of the show was pure gold. So the season opened with the scene of a cave woman, or a prehistoric person. I felt was kind of brilliant, kind of pretentious, kind of like it was trying too hard to be all artsy. However, ultimately I thought it worked, and it gave me a good impression of the show. But now, having seen all the season, I know my suspicions were correct, and that it doesn't have any direct bearing to the rest of the season. Sure, it has a lot of metaphorical meaning, and that's exactly what I thought would happen. I've heard many people find different meanings in this that is relevant to the rest of the season, and that's cool. I think this is one of those things that's meant to be open to interpretation, that many people can find different meanings in. The obvious comparison to the other woman coming and taking the baby after the first woman died can be made to Nora taking care of Wayne's child after he died and Christine abandoned her. And then there's the importance of family and community, how the cave woman lost everything when her community was buried in the cave by the earthquake. It also had the similarity of the earthquakes, which was a constant thing in Jordan throughout Season 2. However, I found the earthquakes to serve the opposite functions, as in the opening sequence it had a negative effect of locking the woman away from her community, whereas later in Season 2 the earthquakes seemed to have more positive effects, first by saving Kevin's life by draining the lake, then after an earthquake Mary woke up and became lucid, and then after the next earthquake Kevin came home to find everyone he knows and cares about waiting for him. So kind of the opposite of losing community, he gained community. And I'm sure there are a dozen more parallels people can find, but no solid, undeniable reason for that opening to be there, which is what I knew it would be. One thing you have to accept when watching this show is a lot of weird, unexplainable things are going to happen, but just go with it and enjoy the ride and you'll be fine. In fact, Season 2 surprised me by explaining a lot more things than I thought it would. For example, in the first episode, when we're introduced to a woman in Jordan who walks around in a wedding dress, and a guy who randomly walks into a cafe and kills a goat and no one seems to care, that was explained later that that's what they were doing at the time of the departure, so they continued to do it to warn off the departure. And when Kevin dies at the end of episode 7, I thought that they would just show him alive again, having gotten rid of Patty with no explanation of what happened on the other side. But I was wrong. We got an entire episode of Kevin in the afterlife trying to get rid of Patty. And of course, the big one I didn't expect to be explained was what happened to the missing girls. But they tackled that one head on and made it a major part of the season's conclusion, which I thought worked beautifully. The season continued the theme of season 1, which was family, and Kevin struggled to maintain his family. In season 1, Kevin lost Lori and Tommy and was slowly losing Jill. This season started with him rebuilding a new family as Jill was firmly committed to them now. Nora came in as his new lover and with the new baby as well that was left on their doorstep. So Kevin had a whole new family, and that they moved to Jordan to start a new life. Things seemed to be going well until Kevin started to slowly lose his mind with the dead Patty constantly talking to him, which drove Nora and the baby away, and he was starting to lose Jill as well, so everything was being threatened. Again, leading him to take extreme measures. He ended up killing himself, getting shot, having adventures in a strange afterlife twice, and at the end came home to find not only Nora and the baby and Jill waiting for him, but also Lori and Tommy, as well as his neighbors Matt and his wife Mary, who had a miraculous recovery. So it's all very satisfying ending that really built on the main crisis of season 1, so I thought it was pulled off amazingly well. And then we got the story of the Murphys, which paralleled that of the Garveys, as the season starts off with a seemingly happy family. However, there's a undercurrent behind them that's sort of not right. We later learn that Michael sneaks off to see his grandfather, whom John had shot. Erica was planning on leaving the family altogether, and Evie staged her own disappearance because she joined the guilty remnant. So John ended up going through what Kevin went through in the previous season, so the connection that they shared at the end of the season was pulled off really well. Also, the big thing to mention is the theme of science versus faith, which was also a huge theme in Lost, seemed even more to the forefront here, as everything seemed to be open to interpretation of whether it was fantastical occurrence of faith or just a coincidence that can be explained away through rational thought. This struggle played out in several ways in the course of the season. One of them was how Lori was struggling to save people from the guilty remnant by using rational thought, but when that didn't work, they gave up and made up a story about magical hugs instead. And when Lori encountered Kevin and his problem with Patty, who was talking to him all the time and destroying his family, she assumed there was a rational explanation that he was just going insane and needed psychiatric help. However, Kevin ended up listening to Virgil, who promised a miracle cure to his problem, which mirrored what Lori said about trying to save people from the guilty remnant, and how they had to resort to magical hugs because she felt that people were more willing to believe an irrational explanation if it offered an easy solution, which was exactly what Virgil was offering Kevin. But an even stronger example of science versus straight faith struggle being played out was with John, who violently opposed any thoughts that Jordan wasn't just a place and that it had special abilities or special properties. So much so that he burned down the house of the man who claimed to have special abilities and threatened Matt, who had a miraculous tale about Mary's recovery, to the point where Matt had to leave town because he refused to deny the special things that did happen there. And this journey also played out wonderfully, as by the end of the season, John was confronted by Kevin's miraculous recovery after he shot him and was forced to reconsider his position about miracles. So while I do think the show is meant to be left open-ended on the science versus faith dilemma, I do think the show is stating that miracles can happen, and those should be a bit more open-minded to it, as Isaac clearly had psychic abilities, as did Virgil, and Kevin managed to wrangle his way through the afterlife back to the living twice, and of course Mary eventually woke up just like Matt knew she would. Another thing that this season had was just because someone wasn't affected by the departure doesn't mean that they're okay. This is why having the setting in the town of Jordan actually worked, because the feeling was they were all special because no departures occurred there, but Evie and Michael struggled to get the point across that just because they weren't affected by the departure doesn't mean that they're all okay. This was also paralleled in Meg's story, as we learned she lost her mother to a heart attack a mere day before the departure occurred, a tragedy that was overshadowed by the departure, so she knew more than anyone that just because someone wasn't personally affected by the departure doesn't mean that they're okay, and that's a theme I thought was pulled off very nicely this year. Nora had her own little journey this season as well. It may not have been as prominent of her as her journey in season 1, but I do feel it was quite a strong one. Contrary to some opinions I heard recently that she was underserviced this season, I believe she had a very clear arc of feeling guilty that she was responsible for her loved ones departing, and was mainly her need to be in a safe place that drove the Garveys to move to Jordan. However, even there, she started to doubt herself when she suspected the missing girls may have departed, and I felt this storyline played out very nicely, as Nora saw parallels to how she was feeling guilty about things she had no control over, and how Erica was feeling guilty about things she had no control over. Nora had her own little struggle of science versus faith, as she was violently opposed to any suggestion that religion was the answer. I do agree she did kind of fade off a little bit towards the end of the season, but overall I loved her storyline this year. If there's one character I thought was underserviced this year, that was Jill, as I thought she was a major reason why I loved season 1. To see her journey from hopelessness to someone who had hope was amazing. I thought she came off as a very strong character at the start of the season, as I found her conversation with Tommy about how she was okay very heartwarming, but after that she kind of seemed to just fade into the background. I wasn't interested in, nor did I particularly buy her relationship with Michael. It seemed like it was just there to try to make more connections between the Garveys and the Murphys. Her reaction to Laurie's return at the end was interesting, but it wasn't really explored this season. They kind of left that to the next season. So now, let me rank the 10 episodes of the season from my least favorite to my favorite, starting with my number 10, No Room at the End, which was by far my least favorite episode of the season, with a contrived story with fake stakes about Matt trying to get married back into Jordan. Number 9 is Orange Sticker, which was the closest thing this season had to a filler episode. Number 8 is 1013, an interesting episode where we got the backstory of Meg, but mostly a setup for the finale. Number 7 is Off Ramp, an interesting offbeat episode that followed Laurie and Tommy as they tried to save people from the guilty remnant. Number 6 is Axis Monday, an interesting episode that introduced us to the Murphys. Number 5 is Lens, a great episode that explored both Nora and Erica's mindset and how they intercepted. Number 4 is International Assassin, a truly unique episode drenched in metaphor. Number 3 is I Live Here Now, an amazing finale with some great heartfelt conclusions and some amazing sequences, but it's not without its flaws. Number 2 is A Matter of Geography, a great follow-up to season 1 that set the stage for the Garveys in season 2 nicely, and had some amazing things about Nora trying to run away from her fears and Kevin feeling guilty about what happened to Patty. And my number 1 favorite episode of season 2 is A Most Powerful Adversary, an extremely chilling episode that was pulled off amazingly well, had one of the most shocking endings I've seen since Michael shot Anna Lucia and Libby in Lost. It was completely out of the blue. I wasn't expecting it at all. The whole episode was just amazing. One of the best hours on television ever. So, my rating for The Leftovers Season 2 as a whole is a 10, the best. Overall, the season was a lot less dreary than season 1, which was a main complaint a lot of people had against it, which even I had to agree that it was just a bit too dreary at times. But it wasn't just that. This season overall just had a lot more amazing sequences, long-term storylines, and a lot more metaphorical themes throughout the season that just showcased how much better the writing was this season. It just took more brave and spectacular risks, such as the opening sequence with the cave woman and showing Kevin in an afterlife when he's an international assassin at a hotel, and also staying true to the theme of the show about Kevin trying to rebuild his family and drawing some nice parallels to John and his family, which slowly came undone during the course of the season, making this overall one of the best years of television I've ever seen. So now we have season 3 to look forward to, as it has been announced that the show has been renewed for season 3, which is good news because many feared that it wouldn't be renewed. However, the showrunners have announced that this will be the last season of the show. As sad as I'll be to see it go, I'm glad that the showrunners know what they're doing and have a plan to end it properly, and it won't be a show like 24 or Dexter that keeps going well after it was good and overstays its welcome. I personally have high hopes for season 3. After this season, the showrunners have completely earned my trust, especially after hearing this will be the last season. I'm sure they'll put a lot of care into making sure it goes out right. I personally think there's still a lot of story left out of the Garveys. The family may be together again, but Kevin and Nora have some reconciling to do, as do Jill and Lori, whose relationship is still trashed, and Tommy is still a broken man, and it will be great to finally see his interactions with Kevin. And personally, I don't really want them to stay in Jarden for season 3. I think they played out Jarden's storyline as much as they could. I think it's time for a new location like Australia, which they've been teased a lot in season 2. It makes me wonder if they were just preparing us to go there in season 3, but we'll see. I would like to see a follow-up on the Murphys, however, but again, we'll see. So that's it for my review of The Leftovers Season 2. Be sure to check out my channel for many more TV show reviews. I do videos for shows like Game of Thrones and Star Trek, and next year I'll start doing weekly episode reviews for shows like The X-Files, Better Call Saul, The Walking Dead, and Vikings. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that, and thanks a lot for watching.